If you're interested in interior design, chances are you've come across or are a fan of Danish furniture, whether it's nightstands, lighting, or bed frames, or whatever else. Your Facebook Marketplace is probably full of all kinds of Danish furniture, things that are listed as Danish or Scandinavian. But why is Danish furniture so popular? Why do we even care about it? What makes it good or bad? Everybody seems to love Danish design, and I have never really encountered anyone who hated it or was not really a fan of it. It seemed kind of almost ubiquitously loved. And that to me is something that's pretty hard to do. How many other styles can you think of that are as almost universally loved as Danish design? So what exactly makes Danish furniture so good? Why do so many people love it? How has it become iconic and recognizable? So today I'm diving into the history of Danish furniture and design to try and answer some of these questions. The first reason that Danish furniture is so good is because of modernism. So what we typically associate with Danish design is actually what we've retroactively deemed Danish modern. The Danish modern style is kind of what we associate with being Danish design and Danish furniture. Although there's a whole huge history of Danish furniture design that came before the Danish modern period. It's just that Danish modern has become the design style that has been recognized and replicated around the world. So we tend to associate it with that. But some people argue that Danish design started as early as the Viking era, with a lot of revolutionary designs coming through like Viking ship design. But today we're going to be talking mostly about Danish modern. Key to the modernist elements of Danish design is a sense of functionalism. Danish modern furniture is extremely analytical. It's answering questions posed by people who have problems, and this furniture is designed in order to answer those problems. The modernist style came about as a response to the difficulties and challenges posed by the Industrial Revolution and the First World War and a lot of the social changes that were happening in the early 20th century. So furniture didn't need to have all these ornamentations or embellishments or intricate designs. It really just needed to be functional, to be simple, to support the people that were using it and not to be useless. In the early period of the Danish modern style, one of the key players, Carl Klint, founded the furniture design school at the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts. And this furniture school was at first really well known, not for making like the things we associate with Danish modern furniture. It was really a place where people would learn how to make cabinets. This is where people really learned the craft of working with wood and making extremely well-made products that were almost scientific in nature. The Danish scholar Per H. Hansen described Klint in this way. He said, Klint did not view furniture design as a matter of aesthetics or form, but rather as a scientific method for maximizing function. And I think this is what really defined the early Danish modern style, was this attention to measuring and making things in an exact way that answered a problem that people had in their lives. Some other examples of this sort of style of being extremely functional and almost precisely scientifically made are things like the propeller stool made in 1927 and the safari chair and the deck chair, which were both in 1933, the church chair, and also the circle bed. All of these pieces of furniture are extremely functional. You can fold them up. They are made very simply, at least on the surface, they feel very simple. I think people were just wanting simple answers to the complicated problems that they had in their lives. The world felt overwhelming, and rather than bringing that overwhelming feeling into their homes, they wanted their homes and their things to be a kind of simplistic refuge for their minds. And these designs were really revolutionary. In cabinet making, they started having these expositions that were visited by people from around the world. And this is when the Danish modern style really started to get some critical acclaim, not just in Europe, but across the world. I will say, I think it's really important to note that the Danish modern style was revolutionary in the way that it executed on these principles, but it did borrow from the Bauhaus movement in the minimalist, clean lines that movement made popular. And it really took those principles and kind of transformed them through a Danish lens, through this approach to materials and to simplicity and functionality that hadn't really been done before. So the second thing that makes Danish furniture so good are the materials. If the modernist period of art and culture made Danish modern furniture design simplistic, minimal, and functional, then the materials that were available for the people designing furniture in Denmark only heightened these principles. So after World War II, materials in general were extremely scarce, and people had to start to get creative with how they were designing furniture and what materials they were using. They had to back off on using some of the more complicated and expensive materials that they had used in the past. And again, people weren't looking for the most complex, ornate objects. They were looking for simple things that would answer their complicated questions. The most important of these is definitely plywood, an extremely cheap material that was widely accessible to furniture designers and was sturdy enough to be used in furniture, and also, could be made to look very beautiful if designed in the right way. And that's exactly what people in Denmark were doing with their furniture designs, was creating things that were cheap and simple and making beautiful things out of them. The best example of this is in 1951, this is post-World War II. Arne Jacobsen designs the ant chair using only a single piece of plywood bent in both directions and creating this extremely iconic chair shape. Plywood was a really important material for Danish designers, but also what was equally important was textile designs. And there are lots of textile designers, I'll show them right here, who became ubiquitously known with the Danish modern style and were used in a lot of the furniture that people were designing. They needed to have them upholstered in iconic fabrics, and people were doing that in new ways that hadn't been done before. Hello, future editing Marin here. I just want to add a little note about teak. Now, teak is definitely controversial because it's indicative of the colonialism embedded in Danish modern design. Denmark was selling old growth teak and using it to make their pieces. So it was at the expense of forests. It was at the expense of people who had protected and called these forests homes. But this is yet another reason why Danish modern furniture is so popular today, is that now, because of environmental protections that have been put in place, you can't fell old growth teak anymore. You can only harvest new growth teak. So teak pieces that are made today look fundamentally different than those that were made in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. With less materials available, it ironically opened a lot of possibilities for designers who had to get extremely creative with the materials that they were using. Designers were paying close attention to the possibilities and limits of their materials and using them in all kinds of new ways. The third thing that I think makes Danish furniture so iconic and well known is because of publicity. We've talked about the design, we've talked about the materials available to the designers, and these things make the actual chairs, they make the actual pieces of furniture that we know and recognize and love so much. But we wouldn't have known about these things if they hadn't become so popular and well known because of the stories around them that were told in the 1950s and the early 60s. So very notably, in the early 1950s, pieces of Danish furniture were purchased and used in Frank Lloyd Wright's Fallingwater house, an iconic house that is deeply indicative of modernist design. So when Frank Lloyd Wright brought these Danish pieces of furniture into the house, people were going crazy for this furniture, and Americans got the rights to produce Danish furniture in the United States, to manufacture it, eventually started creating it at cheaper costs than they were doing in Denmark, and it became extremely widely produced in the United States. Here we also need to talk about the designer Hans Wegner, who was deemed the king of chairs. He designed hundreds of chairs, and a lot of them are ones that we deeply associate with the Danish modern style. His designs got so popular even that there was one of his chairs used in the 1960 Nixon-Kennedy presidential debate. And the chair that was used in that debate, that was televised, one of the most iconic debates of all time, that chair is now just known as the chair. It became so iconic and well known, and it's so well designed that it just was simply the chair. Just as the Danish modern style reached its peak in popularity in the early 1960s, it began to fall out of favor, with people who started to want more experimental styles. They wanted counterculture, they wanted things that were pushing the norm, and Danish furniture and design just wasn't really doing that. Until it, of course, came back into fashion, and I think remains a really important part of contemporary interior design culture. Why was Danish furniture so good? From the history, we can see that Danish furniture answered questions that were posed by people who were confused by all the tumultuousness and change that was happening as a result of 2 world wars and a lot of social changes that were happening. Women were getting the right to vote around the world. There was the Industrial Revolution and mass production of materials and furniture, and these things were changing people's lives and they felt unstable. So Danish modern style was almost an answer to that instability by providing clean lines and functional items that people could use and implement directly in their lives to help them. People didn't want uselessness. They didn't want things that were excessive or over the top. They didn't want ornamentation on their furniture. They wanted something that they could sit in that worked. So the Danish modern style appeals to a wide audience directly because of this. And at its worst, it can be seen as boring, mass-produced, and completely palatable to absolutely anyone. But at its best, it's extremely well-designed furniture that has lasted across decades, that people enjoy and use in their design styles. And for that reason, maybe they will continue to go in and out of style, but I think in a lot of ways, Danish modern furniture is pretty timeless. Personally, I really enjoy Danish modern design, and I implement it in my own design, and I'll probably continue to love it. We'll see if that changes. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon for more interior design and historical content.